Welcome back to the 0 to KSM challenge, where we take this puny little monk and we smash our way to KSM. But to do that, we must pick up where we left off. And in the previous episode, we finally reached that turning point where everything just seemed to click. So if you haven't watched the previous episode, or perhaps this is the first one you're viewing, well then I highly advise you go back and watch from the beginning, because this journey has seen some ups and downs. Well, mostly downs, but we're getting there. In the previous episode, our target was to complete 8 mythic dungeons and fill the vault. This proved a tricky task and was super stressful at times, but we pushed on and in the end, we came through. And just like that, our vault was filled. Which leads me on to this week, because gearing so far has been pretty slow and I wanted to speed things up, which meant filling the vault once again. Now, unlike the previous challenge in season 1, I don't want to rush this one. I want to take it slow. I want to take things in and I want to enjoy the experience. So although it is potentially possible for me to push on and get this done within the next couple of weeks, I think at some point for the gear, I might just have to chill at a certain level, maybe 11s, and farm some crests because, like mentioned, gearing has been a bit slow for my liking. But this week, however, now that I've finally reached the 10 and above bracket, I kind of wanted to continue with that, at least for this week, and just experience what life was like on a tyrannical week, because tyrannical is notorious for making healers cry. Yeah, some bosses just hurt, man. Oh my god. So, the plan for this week is to not only fill the vault, but to bring every key that I have up to at least a plus 10, because I have a bunch of 2s and I kind of want to fix that. But before we jump into that, if you would like to watch me live or potentially join me for some keystones, you can catch me live over on Twitch a few days a week. A link to that and all of my other socials can be found below. So we start this week at item level 409 and a Mythic Plus rating of 1108. And we start the week just like any other week. Of course, we do the weeklies before we open the vault. But this week is a little special because we have 4 mythic dungeons to complete. And the reward from this is a cache from the new raid, which contains an item level of at least 428. Now, because of the item pool this contains, it can actually go up to, I believe, as high as 438. I know this because I got a 438 ring on my druid. Now, I tried finding details about this online to get my facts right so I don't feed you guys false information, but unfortunately I couldn't find anything. So let me know what you guys got from this cache. So we do indeed go through the 5 heroic dungeons, and then I find a group that's farming ruby life pools for the 4 mythic dungeons. I think for the most part, the majority of the player base do it this way because it's quite close to Valdrakken and it's a relatively small dungeon, so it goes pretty quick. And then we move over to the vault, and as mentioned, we do start this reset with 409 item level. Obviously, I think it goes without saying, the item that we want most of all from the vault would obviously be Tear, because then we would have our 2 set. Along with this, the Rainsong trinket from Vortex Pinnacle is very high on my list as well. So Tear or the trinket would be absolutely huge. And like mentioned, we filled our vault last week, so we've got 3 options today. But before we get into those, of course, we're going to go ahead and open our heroic cache. And from this, we receive a 415 staff. Now, in terms of item level, this could be seen as an upgrade, but I would be losing out on a lot of haste. So as much as I don't want to lose the haste, I could be forced to use this. And then we go ahead and open the heroic raid cache. And from this one, we receive a 428 neck. Now this one does come with haste, but it's a little on the low side. So I think with this, because it doesn't have main stat, I will actually keep the 415 that I have equipped. But what that does mean is I can potentially upgrade this or a future neck up to 428 purely using flight stones. And then it was time for the vault. The very first time that we had 3 slots available. And boy, I was excited for this one. Though, unfortunately for me, all 3 slots were kind of bad. So ideally for Mistweaver Monk, in terms of dungeon, the stat priority is of course item level and intellect. And then the first 2 secondary stats would be haste and mastery, in an ideal world anyway. But unfortunately for us, all 3 of these items have versatility and crit. It took a little time to decide this one, but honestly looking back at the footage, it was kind of a no-brainer. The waste in terms of item level was quite a huge upgrade. I mean, I was currently rocking a 402, and this waste was a hero piece at 431. But yeah, gems could have been a good shout too. But I decided to take the waste because it is, like I mentioned, a massive item level upgrade. Out of the 3 items, we equip the waste and it takes our total item level up to 411. And the key we are presented with this week is a Nell Forest's layer plus 12. But before we jump into any mythic dungeons for the week, I wanted to talk about a couple of things and upgrade some of my gear. So before I completed the dungeons and handed in the quests, I actually forgot to pick up the Niffen weekly, so I missed out on 250 rep. Along with this, I also forgot to do the world boss. I think I forgot it last week too, I can't remember. Though don't worry, because once again, he didn't drop me any loot. Now, someone said in the comments in one of the previous videos that the world boss is actually bugged and doesn't drop anything. However, a community member last week did actually link a bit of gear that they got from the world boss, so maybe it was bugged at the time, maybe it's fixed now, I really don't know. Either way, he doesn't drop anything for me. And then there is the Onyx Amulet that I could go and grind for, and it would be quite beneficial. It's quite powerful, and I probably wouldn't upgrade it for a while, but honestly, I just can't be asked. It's just one thing that I really can't be bothered to do. My time is very limited. Everything you see in today's episode was recorded on a Wednesday. If I don't do these episodes the way they're done now and I take too long, you could end up getting like 1 episode every 2 weeks. But yeah, that wouldn't be good enough, would it? And to be honest, I kind of like the way things are now. And talking about the way I like to do things, I've kind of changed my approach with this series. So the first 2 episodes kind of had the build-up dungeons, and then we had a featured dungeon where I'd go more into detail on some of the mechanics, the trash, the bosses. Though last episode, because of what I went through, it was more about me and my journey and not a dungeon. It was a low point for me at the beginning, and everything I did to overcome it, to me, I just thought it was special. So I think for the most part going forward, I'm just going to do what I feel is right on the day. I may end up talking about a specific dungeon, boss or mechanic purely because of what happens that week. I could even showcase some of the little tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way. But I think for the most part, I'm just going to go with the flow and see what comes naturally. But most importantly, I am going to look to avoid as many bridges as possible, because if I fall off of another one, I'm just never going to hear the end of it. One time, man, it happened one time. You big meanies. Yo, you. Yeah, you. Did you know that leaving a like on this video increases your chances of getting the best loots from your weekly vault? Alright, so maybe it doesn't. Fine, I get it. I know when I'm not wanted. Back to the video. Alright, it's Mythic Plus time, and as mentioned, we have a Nell Forest plus 12. So this week is a tyrannical week, which means bosses are going to be a lot harder. Along with this, we have Volcanic at plus 7 and Sanguine at plus 14. Maybe. Yeah, we'll get to that. Now, I don't really want to downgrade my key to a 10, but I did want to start at a 10, so I started looking for any dungeon at a plus 10 level. And of course, it goes without saying that this week we wanted to carry on and we wanted to fill our vault once again, which meant completing 8 mythic dungeons in total. So we looked for a key, and unfortunately the one that I chose to start with was a Vortex Pinnacle, and I don't have a good history with this place. Now, I just want to start by reminding you guys that this is my first mythic run of the day, although I have done the weeklies, which involve a bunch of dungeons. It's a bit of a jump when you're doing a plus 10. And of course, this is the first time experiencing Tyrannical at this sort of level, in terms of healing anyway. Now, up to the dragon boss, it doesn't go too badly. But come on, you guys have pugged this place, you know what it's like. So this one actually starts off okay. Everyone's kind of stacked together. We're moving out of the breath, apart from the evoker, of course. We're jumping over the circle. No, once again I lied, and the priest thinks they can just run through to the beginning of it. Oh no, why do I come to this place? You guys see why I hate coming here now, right? Anyway, we continue and the paladin ends up combat resing the priest. And here is where I try and do something smart, but doesn't quite work. So I tried being smart and using Transcendence, which I've done before successfully. Even looking back at the footage, I slowed it down and I stopped it. I did it perfectly fine. I didn't even clip the side, but for whatever reason, I still got silenced. So don't be fooled by the line. It's a lot thicker than you might think. This, of course, leads to my death. Unfortunately, the priest died along with me to exactly the same thing. I do get picked up because we have one more combat res available and we continue the fight. However, unfortunately, later on, we find ourselves in the situation where we don't have any DPS because things just get too much for me to handle. The warrior ends up dying to one of the frontals. The evoker also fails to jump over the winds and ends up dying. Oh, just a quick tip for evokers and demon hunters, by the way, you can double jump and get over that. I didn't know this when I started the challenge. And with 6% remaining, Dilly tries to be smart again and makes exactly the same mistake. So good job we have a prop paladin, right? Yeah, I still need to play one of those stupid paladins. From here, we make our way to the last boss, but before we get there, there is a pack just before you go down the little spiral. And oh my goodness, man, this pack is brutal, and this is a tyrannical week. Next week on Fortified, holy moly. I went up to like 76k healing, and I didn't even use revival. Yeah, it was pretty nuts. There's not really too much to cover for the last boss. It all goes pretty well, apart from those failing to jump for the static cling. The ad perhaps takes a little too long to be nuked down. But thankfully, no one fails. To the triangle, we take down the boss, 2-chesting the run, and it takes our total rating up to 1,149. No rain song, unfortunately, no loot in general, but it was a good key to start the day. Man, it sucks that I gotta farm this place for the stupid trinket. From here, I decide to jump into another 10, and we sign up to a Nell Forest. Now, for this one, I'm not going to bother covering any of the ads or any of the bosses, but there are a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. So, for the most part usually, and tanks, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you always drag the first 2 mobs into the pack round the corner on the left, right? Regardless of the key. So to me, the fact that we're starting this run just tanking these 2 ads is kind of like, you start asking questions straight away, right? Like, man, is it going to be one of those runs? And yeah, you'd be right. It was a very slow run. If there's one thing that's made me want to tank this season is just how slow some of these tanks have been for me. Yeah, I don't know. That might be a me issue. I kind of like a fast-paced dungeon, but man, I miss tanking. But after we kill the first 2 ads, there's something that I notice, and you can see me panning the camera back in confusion. What the hell is Sanguine doing in a +10? Well, I did some research after the dungeon, and as it turns out, there were a lot of issues on NA the day before, where keys basically had no affixes at all. So they had to disable all mythic dungeons. I guess when they turned them back on, they were still a little balked. The other thing I wanted to talk about involved some loot at the end that was traded to me, and it put me in a bit of an awkward situation. So at the end of the dungeon, I was traded a best in slot Windwalker one-hand. This is also very good for a prop paladin. So I did accept the trade without too much hesitation. I didn't really give it too much thought. I mean, I was getting loot, albeit I can't use it until the challenge is over, but still. Now, the paladin wasn't very happy about this. They said a couple of things in party chat and then proceeded to whisper me as they were told it was traded to the healer. And for obvious reasons, I have decided not to show you what was said. I just wanted to share my situation because it's something that a lot of you guys actually go through yourselves. I'm honestly not too bothered about loot. Higher gear for me means more healing and I can push further, of course. But man, loot causes the biggest drama in these games. I understand a lot of the frustration. You grind and sometimes your luck just isn't there. But there's no need to be a buttface and start whispering people a load of abuse. There's just no need, man. And I mean, I'm not even going to use the weapon until the challenge is over, so if the guy just whispered me and they were nice about it, I would have gave it to them. But they weren't, so I ignored them and I kept it. And you know what? 10 out of 10 would do it again. But I would like to take this opportunity to once again remind you guys not to message anyone you see in these videos. Like, for whatever reason, maybe they've done something silly, they've died to a certain mechanic, or in this case, just been a complete buttface. You can just laugh at them in the comments, it's fine. There's no need to message them in game. If you do, you're just as bad as they are. Anyway, we end up 2-chesting this run with only 3 deaths, and it takes our total rating up to 1,240. For the next run, I had a thought. The first 2 keys weren't the greatest, even though we +2'd them. If I was to do my Neltharian's Lair 12 and handpick a couple of players that were fairly geared, perhaps we could completely smash this one. Because luckily for me, now that I've realised it, in this sort of key range, you typically get a lot of higher geared players that are crest farming. So this could potentially make the challenge a whole lot easier. It's really cheeky, I know, but because of the upgrade system and the way things work, a lot of geared players are actually farming like 11s and 12s for crests. From 11s and 12s, you break into the Wirram crests. And along with this, you can obtain champion gear, which you can upgrade up to 437. So, This might be the tastiest group I've put together so far, and it begins with a 439 Prot Paladin and a 434 Shadow Priest. I then pick up a 440 BM Hunter, for Bloodlust obviously, we don't like Hunters. Oh, and as it turns out, the Paladin and the Priest were actually doing the Mythic Dungeon weekly, so they weren't actually bothered about the crests. I just do Mythic Zeros. Now, there's not too much to cover in this place as you would expect. I've put together such a good team. But I guess that's the beauty of running your own key, and that's my biggest tip if you are ever struggling to achieve KSM. Because what I just did, and the group I put together, you guys can do it too. You ever joined a key where you inspect everyone and like everyone has insane gear, and then you go and inspect the leader whose key it is, and their gear is horrible? Yep, that's the beauty of running your own key. So we do indeed free chest this run, and it takes our total rating up to 1,276. We actually got loot from this run too, a ring with a lot of haste. Oh yeah, and I don't know if you've noticed, but we only had one death. You want to know how it happened? Well, in last week's episode, I forgot to include one of the deaths in Underrot when I, let's just say I did something silly. So, Semi, my boy, this one's for you. Oh, and because I want the video to stay monetized, I'm gonna have to do some dubbing.
I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. I think about it every night and day. Spread my wings and fly away.
Man, me and Brian should release a single. That guy has the voice of an angel. The Nelfarian's Lair presented us with a 15 Nell Forest. Though because we have already been there today, I decide to sign up to a few keys, and the key we get into is a Brackenhide Hollow 13. Yeah, so I'm trying to keep it around this level. I don't really want to push beyond a 13. There isn't really too much to cover in this run, to be fair. Everyone was quite geared. Of course, even though this was a 13, we had Sanguine. And unfortunately, we only 2 chests this run, which brings our total rating up to 1,397. No loot for me personally, although the tank does trade me a neck piece. Terrible stats for Mistweaver, but it's pretty good for Brewmaster. Well, it looks like today is the day we get loads of gear for my off-specs that I can't even play. Though, to be fair, there was nothing actually here for Mistweaver, so my loot spec was actually set to Brewmaster for the Truemath trinket. With 4 dungeons down and 4 to go, things were looking pretty good today. Though, at this point, I actually started struggling to get into keys. I was signing up to 12s and 13s, and I was just getting declined and declined and declined. Kind of felt like I was DPS. Aren't healers meant to have it easy? So I bite the bullet and start signing up to some 11s. Now, this run went really well. I think everyone was fairly geared. Of course, we had Sanguine to deal with. At the last boss, I make a bit of an error thinking the frontal is on the side that I am on. Turns out I just rolled into it. I get picked up and we finish the dungeon with only 3 deaths. We +3 the key and it takes our total rating up to 1,450. Man, we're making good progress. And then it happened. After mocking Keita for years about the parrot mount I get in Freehold, and the fact that I have the other parrot from the island expeditions as well, the tank not only gets a pair of boots, they get a splintered spark, but they also get the mount. This is one I've wanted for a very long time, and I stopped farming mounts in like Cataclysm. I was pretty big on farming mounts back in the day, but I really can't be arsed now. Though this one is definitely one that I want. They did jokingly offer the mount for 400k, which in my eyes, really cheap, but nevertheless I can't actually trade across server anyway, so sucks to be me, I guess. We then find ourselves in a Freehold 13. And man, after the incident with the mount, if the dice drops in here for someone, I think I'm gonna cry. I'm trying to farm this on my Demon Hunter and I've seen about 11 people loot it in front of me. A couple of people live on stream too, by the way. So we get going. Of course, we have to deal with Sanguine, which I'm kind of used to at this point. Nothing to really cover in this run, to be honest. The 2 deaths that we had during the entire run were before the first boss, where I get flustered. The bosses go down really well, no one's standing in much that they shouldn't be. And I don't remember looking at the rest of the party, but just judging by the numbers at the end, everyone was really geared. Yep, once again, because of the upgrade system, really geared players are farming like 11s, 12s and 13s. Of course though, if I was a DPS, I would probably struggle to get into these groups. So we end up 2 chests in this key and it takes our total rating up to 1,495. No loot for me this run, but would you look at that?
Emotional damage.
Yep, that guy goes on my enemy list. Why do I get the feeling the hunter wants to drink it too? And instantly after asking, the monk just leaves the group. I don't blame them, to be honest. From here, we sign up to a Halls of Infusion 12. And this one didn't start off as well as the others. We make it to the first boss and already we have 8 deaths. Yeah, the trash leading up to the first boss, there are some things that go off that is very ouchy. The first boss is very messy, we end up killing it, only the warrior dies, and already this place feels like it's more challenging than everything I've done so far, and I kind of feel like it shouldn't be. Oh, and just like previous episodes with Halls of Infusion, we have a hunter in the group, so hopefully they don't derp as much. The frog boss goes down absolutely fine, but that isn't the one I am worried about. It's the third and the fourth boss that I'm worried about, and of course the bridge boss as well, I guess. But also the trash pack leading up to the third boss. Yeah, those dragons and the AoE, and once again incredibly painful even on a tyrannical week. Next week's gonna be awful. So the third boss was a bit of a challenge because obviously it's a tyrannical week and bosses are a lot harder. But there is also pulsing damage that happens throughout the entire fight. And of course you have stuff like Glacial Surge that you really shouldn't stand in. One day guys, one day. I was happy with my healing though. 55k for the boss fight. Nice. Oh, I also received this whisper as well.
Very nice heal. Heart.
It doesn't happen often, but when it does, man, it feels good. Is Dilly finally getting the hang of healing? I don't know. What do you guys think? Alright, so everyone makes it across the bridge. No one dies, and then we start the last boss. Everything seems to be going to plan, and then... this never gets old. We make it past the first gauntlet, and everything seems to be going fine. The hunter is combat resed, and thankfully, they make it through. Though unfortunately, we have to go through the gauntlet for a second time. We start taking down the ads in the middle of the room, and sadly, we lose both the demon hunter and the hunter. We push on, and thankfully, we do end up timing this run. It takes our total rating up to 1,571, and we receive some boots from the chest. Exactly the same ones as I'm wearing, although these ones are a champion piece and a big upgrade. The demon hunter loots the fragment trinket, and because my trinkets are bad, I just simply ask if they need it, but sadly, they do. Ah well, you can't have everything. It'd be nice though. From here, we move on to the last and final dungeon of the day, an Alderman 13. And this place is probably something I should consider farming because it has a lot of good stuff for me. Which, come to think of it, is pretty sad because I need to farm both Vortex Pinnacle for the Rainson trinket and Alderman for various bits and pieces. Now, so far, I think Vortex Pinnacle is my least favorite dungeon, and Alderman is probably my second least favorite. That doesn't bode well for the monk. Yeah, Vortex I think you guys probably understand. Alderman, however, I mean, it's not the worst dungeon in the world, but I just don't enjoy it as much. I mean, my favorite 2 dungeons are probably like Brackenhide Hollow and Nell Forest, so I'm just weird, I guess. Alright, so Alderman starts okay, the group is fairly geared around the 420 mark. We get to the first boss and, oh man, positioning on this guy is just so obnoxious. I'm sure healing on some classes it's not as bad, but when I need to position correctly, like with the Feline Stomp, oh my god, it's so annoying. I derp during the boss fight, I try and roll to get into a better position. Unfortunately, the tank has the same thing in mind and I get hit by the cleave. Thankfully, I don't die, but still, it was a bit awkward. Second boss goes absolutely fine. We get to the third one, and once again, I get timings a bit wrong. Man, it's a horrible feeling when you have no deaths and you are the first. It's okay though, because I get rezzed and kind of let the demon hunter die. Oops. I can't be the only death. Come on, man. It's okay though, because we get to the fourth boss and I just don't see the fire orb. And yeah, I die again. Kind of goes through my party frames and I guess I just didn't see it. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Leading up to the last boss, the tank decides to go a bit crazy, and I don't know if this is a compliment to my healing or the entire group, but they end up pulling like 4 groups, and although I feel really good about my healing, Sanguine's kicking my butt. It's kind of out of my control though, let's be fair. We get to the last room just before the last boss, and there's a little skip you can do to avoid the 2 time reavers, because they're just annoying to deal with. I believe you can use both sides to jump up, but I've typically only done it on the right side. It's a little fiddly at first and a little weird to get used to, but you get the hang of it. You simply jump against this side of the wall, and eventually you'll make it over. Yeah, it still takes me a few attempts. The last boss goes absolutely fine. We end up 2 chesting the key, and it takes our total rating up to 1,646. We do loot a ring from the chest. It's a little low on the haste side, but that does mean we can upgrade our current rings. So all in all, not too bad. So starting the day with a couple of 10s, we push into some 12s and 11 and even some 13s. No depleted keys, everything timed, and we end this reset with an item level of 414 and a Mythic plus rating of 1646. Damn, we've made so much progress in such little time. But it's honestly hard for me to judge in terms of item level. I don't know what I should be expected to heal, how far I should be potentially pushing with 414 item level, and perhaps what I should be focusing on next week because I'm still lacking a lot of gear. But all in all, very happy with my progress. I'm very much enjoying the monk and it's been quite a challenge so far. Now, of course, in terms of the monk, if I was able to play this more than just the Wednesday, I would be able to push a lot further and I would be able to obtain a lot more gear. But because time is very limited, this is all I can manage for now. But yeah, let me know in the comments how far you guys think I should realistically be pushing at 414 item level, because I'm curious to know. Well, I hope you guys did enjoy today's episode. If you did, a like would be much appreciated. But that's me done. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.